Hi, welcome to Cubs and Culture for 2018, November 16th. We're going to try something a little bit different today. As you can see, we already have the trailer up for Lawrence of Arabia, which is the Best Picture winner from 1962. It's a David Lean film. It's probably one of the most famous films that we call epic. It's about T. Lawrence, who was a British Army officer who helped in the Middle Eastern theater in World War I integrate and lead the Arab revolt. I don't know the history all that well, and when I was looking into it, it doesn't seem particularly all that accurate. The attack on Aqaba especially seems to be just backwards and wrong. And then the other thing is T. Lawrence is a deeply controversial circle figure, and there's certain things in this movie, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes, which we basically only have his word for, and he wasn't necessarily all that forthright on it. So setting all that to the side, I really like this movie's pretty good. I think it loses a lot of steam in the second half when you sort of get sort of the psychological answers to Lawrence starting to be answered, and it's not nearly as interesting and complicated as the first half. So there's that, and then the other thing is there's no real reflection in this film about British imperialism. There's a little bit on Lawrence's part about whether or not it's okay for them to basically carve up the Turkish Empire and ignore local autonomy and stuff like that. So the movie kind of incidentally is just sort of pro-British Empire, which isn't all that shocking. It's quite a long film. It's almost 4 hours long, and a lot of it takes place in the desert. And the movie is absolutely gorgeous to look at, and everything like that. It's very well acted. As a point of historical fact, this movie is Peter O'Toole's introductory film, and it's probably his most famous role. And the central performance is very, very good, and I really do like this movie, and I like sort of the complicated nature of Lawrence, at least for the first half. Now, the other sort of thing that's a real problem for me is there's this sequence in the second half, which I'm not going to show, where Lawrence is captured by the Turks and then sexually assaulted and/or just beaten. It's a little bit ambiguous in the text. And Seven Pillars, which is the book that this movie is based on, and it's principally based on, and Lawrence, that's his autobiography, talks about this. And there he claims he was raped. We're actually pretty sure, historians are pretty sure that never actually happened. And it was an invention on Lawrence's part for one or two reasons. The first reason is to just discredit the Turks because he was still trying to help Prince Faisal and the British Empire to discredit the Turks as a bit of propaganda. And then there's also a sort of an implication that it might actually have been a sexual fantasy of his that he sort of just wrote into his autobiography just to get it out. We do know the real Lawrence paid an army buddy to beat him a couple of times a week, which the movie doesn't go into this. And so it's really, he's a very fascinating individual. And the movie gets into a little bit of that, because there's times in which, like at the beginning of the film where he's putting out the cigarette, Lawrence seems to be more okay with pain than a normal person should be. And I kind of wish the film, even though it was not really a possibility in the 60s, when it went into the more of his masochism. And anyway, that rape sequence is really problematic in sort of the narrative because it doesn't it sort of robs the character of mystique and everything like that, because it's him being humbled, which is sort of a creepy way of doing it. Anyway, so this scene is the introduction of Ali Sharif, and he's sort of the main. He's a composite character. He's not based off of any particular person, but it's a composite character, and it's sort of the main like friendship he has with the Arabs. Now, I really like this scene, and I really like the direction, as you saw a couple of seconds ago, the really far distance, and it's just a black shape, and it's somewhat ominous, and you're not entirely sure what's happening, and it's just sort of gorgeous cinematography and everything like that. And this movie, this scene especially, the pace doesn't bother me until the second half, where I think, because you're starting to get psychological answers to Lawrence, it becomes drags, but in the first half it's sort of a very deliberate, and I really like how this scene, you're not entirely sure of anyone's motives, and for Ali, who's the guy on the camel, he's just protecting his property here, and it's something of a state of nature, in the Hobbes sense, and so, like, in a sense, he behaved completely within bounds of rationality, but Lawrence here is going to react very, very negatively, and you gotta look at, in terms of like Lean's direction, how perfectly composed this is to make a triangle with Lawrence on the left, and then the body and Ali on the right, and then the camel on the back. They made it like almost a perfect triangle. And there's something very profoundly interesting about Lawrence's drives. As you just saw here, he's almost trying to bait Ali into shooting him. Because he's like, I have drawing from it as well, meaning the well, and he's very curt and short with him, and Ali is showing sort of restraint, and it's a very interesting dynamic. Omar Sharif plays Ali, and he's also in Dr. Zhivago. I think he's better in Zhivago, but I really like this performance. I actually kind of wish the movie was about that character, or took the perspective of the Arabs, more so than Lawrence, because I think that would have been much more of an interesting thing, and you would not necessarily undermine it would undermine the colonialism and imperialism a little bit. I also got to say this, I like how barren this scene is, because it is a character introduction, and these are sort of the two main driving forces of the story, and their friendship eventual, because of course they're fighting here, then over the course of the story they become friends. It's pretty standard plot structure, and so there's that, and there's just something about how the way in which, with the 70 millimeter Panavision, and the cinematography, sort of the deep focus, and it feels like the desert just goes on forever, and it's just these two characters characters meeting in the foreground, so everything is focusing about the dynamics and how they are behaving. I also like, again, you can see the triangle again. I also really like how, again, sort of the writing here is very, very sparse and direct, and there's something correct about that, and how the sparseness of the visuals also is the sparseness of the writing here. And this bit right here about and being a little people, barbarous and cruel, that keeps coming up again and again, and they actually turn it against Lawrence. The only major award this film did not win is screenplay, which I think is a little bit unfortunate, because actual fact, I think the screenplay gets a lot more, deserves a lot more credit than it gives, because a lot of people talk about the cinematography and Lean's visual direction, but that stuff is hollow if there's not a core to the film. And in this case, because it's such a long epic, Lawrence's complexity is why the movie is not a hollow thing. Okay, so let me actually, at this point, do a little bit of a plot summary because of the next sequence. So he's eventually going to end up working with this guy to take Aqaba, and I think I'm saying that right, which is a town that the Turks are holding, and they go through the desert, a very inhospitable desert, to get there, and he ends up having Lawrence ends up having to save someone, and as they come out of the desert, they meet up with another Arab tribe, and they form a temporary alliance. And this encampment is made up of two different tribes of the Arabs, one from Ali and one from the other guy. And the guy he saved is committed some sort of offense. It's not really explained, it doesn't really matter, in which he's going to cause a fight between the two tribes. And I really like this sequence. I think it's the most powerful bit of storytelling, because it's so because the guy he's gonna, it's two things. One, he's gonna act a little bit like King Solomon here and split the difference, because a Noodle's side, the guys on the right, have to require that guy to be killed. But if he's killed by one of them, the other tribe, blood for blood. But because he is tribeless, he can do it. So there's that. And then you don't know who this guy is at any point until... and then this is the guy he saved until you get to this little bit right here. And I think that is one of the most powerful moments in the... in cinema, because at the end of when I first saw it, I was like, oh shit, and everything like that. I do like also that Lawrence, not only is it being King Solomon, but he actually does at least take a moment to confirm. And there's something about O'Toole's performance here, because eventually this Lawrence participates in the massacre, and the implication here, this is the first man he's ever killed, and there's something profoundly structured about his performance, where it's always like violence is always there, and it's just slowly seeping out, which makes sense because eventually he gets to the massacre at the end. Okay, so this scene has several features that are of note. One, it's him reporting back after taking Aqaba, how you say it. You got Claude Rains in the back, who it's not entirely clear, unless you're versed in the history, exactly who that character is. He's obviously some sort of intelligence officer, and I really do like Claude Rains. I actually think gives he's only in like 4 scenes. He gives a very good performance where it's not entirely sure that guy's motives, and he sort of has a bemused, sardonic detachment, as Claude Rains does. The other thing is, the scene also has a couple of things that's important for Lawrence. Is him guessing that they're going for Jerusalem, him understanding that he needed to take the city because it would have been too far behind his right, etc. Shows sort of it has an intuitive grasp of the military tactics, but also of the region. Because again, it's sort of like Lawrence of Arabia, and it's part of it is him being caught between his loyalty between British, being a British subject, and then also like the Arab revolt. So there's that. But there's the other thing about this is, and this is one of the reasons why I kind of wish they went into, again, in the 60s, it was very unlikely that they would do this. But he's going to explain here, and it's the sort of the companion piece to the execution scene. He's going to explain here that he enjoyed killing. He enjoyed the execution, which shows great self-awareness. And one, that there's a great self-awareness, but two, he that he didn't like that he liked it, which shows, that's a second order. That's a desire about a desire, which shows great, not only self-awareness, but self-reflection and thinking about it. And well, anyway, going back to what I was saying, this scene is one of the reasons why I kind of wish they went more into his. Again, he paid him a buddy to beat him up, so like masochism, because it would have made this scene and this notion that he enjoyed killing him. It would have made a little bit more sense, because people with masochistic desires also often has sadistic desires. I also have to say this is one of the most British things. I really like how vulnerable Peter O'Toole looked over after he admitted he enjoyed killing, and the general's response isn't to talk about what he just said, because that basically admitted something that you don't say in polite company. It's to get up and immediately do the British thing of dismissing it as rubbish, and then he immediately changes the conversation into what the fuck are you wearing, and everything like that. And it's kind of a act, but at the same time it shows a young officer in crisis, where the general realizes that he has a very he knows this area and he knows military tactics. He's going to be very useful militarily, but the general, he's doing sort of the bare minimum to deal with the situation in sort of a very British way of just basically ignoring what he said and trying to it's just he needs a boost. He needs to be told he did a good job, so he does everything like that. And so it's kind of funny, actually, how British this sequence is in the end. And so you combine all of that with Claude Rains being satanic in the background, and you get the sense that of Lawrence himself being used by the British Empire. Which I'm glad that thought is in the film, but it's not enough to undermine the start of the imperialism. Now, this scene is way at the end. This is after he was captured by the Turks, and he wants to resign because basically the movie implies he has a god complex, and then him being raped got him humbled. And then he realized he was just a normal man, which I find, one, it makes the character far less complex, because it gives him a very identifiable drive that he basically that he's like a narcissist, and he thought of himself as this great man, blah blah blah, leading the Arabs to freedom, which is kind of implied, but it simplifies the character because it makes his identity sort of solidified, which is kind of needed within the context of the story, but it robs the second half of heat and tension. And it happens a little bit too fast in the second half, too soon, I should say. So there's that. And then the other thing about this scene, about the scene is sort of the political machinations of the French and British agreeing to divide the Turkish Empire, including Arabia. I find it a little bit clunky that the two scenes of him wanting to get out because of him being humbled. I mean, it's of course like a red herring that it's about the treaty. It's also, as a point of fact, T.E. Lawrence, the real guy, knew about this agreement before it happened, before he even took Aqaba or went to see the Arab. So this is totally ahistorical. But as I was saying, the political stuff is a little bit clunky, and it doesn't quite fit together well with the being humbled, and it feels a little bit like too soon. It feels too plotty and everything like that. And then it feels a little bit contrived that Prince Faisal just happens to be there, and so I feel like the scene could have used another pass on it, and it makes the character trying to resign here because of being humbled, it just utterly sort of simplifies him, because it's just, oh, his ego is bruised, therefore he needs to quit, which is not in terms of what was presented in the first half. It feels a little bit like a letdown, everything like that. So overall, I mean, and then I really wish, the other thing about the politics is there's no self-reflection here, really, because there's nothing in the text to imply that you should feel bad about Arabia being divided, especially since it's eventually Prince Faisal ends up basically, in a sense, betraying Lawrence because of needing to get rid of him because of him being a political rival, because he was so popular among the Arabs, and everything like that. And the thing about the rape sequence, because it never actually happened, the reason why I find it so creepy is it feels very, very pat and very, very contrived. Like, they could have thought of a better way. Especially, I mean, they should have been plot. It wasn't really known. The movie was made that it was probably a false account, and I really wish. Again, I don't know if Ween was aware of the he paid people to beat him, but anyway. So there's that. Overall, I really like Lawrence of Arabia. I think it's about as good as a Bridge on the River Kwai, but for my money, Dr. Zhivago is the Ween masterpiece. So that's going to be it for Cubs and Culture. See you guys tomorrow.